Okay, I think we can start. Welcome everybody, and welcome to this workshop that is devoted to presentation and discussion about the regional anti-corruption report, anti-corruption reforms in the Balkans, or as our friends from Bulgaria and gurus in the anti-corruption work on the Balkans from the Center of Study of Democracy in Sofia titled it "Looking Back at the Next Decade." As always, they come in with a nice title, so we will look at the developments in the anti-corruption through this already traditional tool that we use in the CELDI network to how the things are going in the anti-corruption efforts in the Balkans, but with a big focus on the future, what it brings. I'm Alexander Karzalovsky, Director of the Macedonian Center for International Cooperation, but here also in the role of coordinator of the CELDI network that deals with good governance and especially anti-corruption in the Balkans for many years now. Today we will have, as I said, focuses on regional anti-corruption report that will be presented a little bit later, after we have keynote speeches by the Ljubčo Nikolovsky, Deputy Prime Minister for Fight Against Corruption. I think one of the first instances in one of these countries to devote such a high-level official to fight against corruption. So we thought it would be good to have him on board for this regional presentation. Nikola Bertolini, head of operation in the EU delegation in Macedonia, but we know him from his Brussels time and one of the initiators of also this CELDI network that started some 10 years ago while he was responsible for the Balkans in Brussels. Later, after their keynote speeches, there will be a presentation by Ruslav Stefanov of the regional report on anti-corruption. We will have a reflection on that by Giulio Veneri, head of Center for Thematic Expertise in Engineering in Commission, and also some inputs from our colleagues Misha Popovic from Institute for Democracy and Biljana Pejovic of the Center for Democratic Transition in Montenegro. Just before I hand out the floor to the Vice Prime Minister Nikolovsky, just to say a few words on the ground rules about this workshop that is estimated to last 1.5 hours. It will be recorded for internal purposes, and it's already started, as I can see. You will see the additional rules in the chat box, so you can check. The CSD colleagues will put up the rules for the webinar, and you can join later in the discussion by raising hands, as it is done in Zoom, or put your questions in the Q&A box. The panelists may also answer in written on those Q&A until the time comes for discussion, or by speaking afterwards. That's all from my starting introductory speech, and I will not delay this further, and will give the floor to Ljubčo Nikolovsky, Vice Prime Minister for Fight Against Corruption in Macedonia. So, Vice Prime Minister, the floor is yours. Just we don't hear it yet. Have you? Something is wrong with the sound. Is it better now?
Can you speak up now? Did you hear?
Yeah, now it's
Okay, great. Mr. Nikola Bertolini, Head of Cooperation of the European Union delegation in our country. There, Mr. Krzalovski, Director of the Macedonian Center for International Cooperation. They are participants at today's forum. First of all, I would like to thank you for you providing me to this opportunity for me to participate at today's event, which is dedicated to anti-corruption reforms in the Western Balkans. The results of the most recent regional report on fight against corruption, prepared by the Network of Leadership and Integrity at the Southeast Europe, are welcomed by us as a support for creation of effective measures and politics to deal with this phenomenon that is experienced by the countries of the Western Balkans. North Macedonia, as a part of this region, has suffered a series of political, economic, and social transformations that left significant consequences, especially in the area of corruption and crime. As a candidate country for accession to the EU, there are a lot of challenges in front of us in dealing with corruption, crime, and these issues in the country. Because of that, in March this year, the government of the Republic of North Macedonia adopted a plan for fight against corruption, which includes 18 system requirements, measures, and politics. It is more than clear that the fight against corruption means in-depth cooperation between the competent authorities under the government, ministries, independent institutions, such as the State Commission for Prevention of Corruption, and the courts as well, civil society, private sector also. The adopted plan is drawn upon the basis of all recommendations and proposals of authorized institutions, starting with the published public call for submission of proposals by the non-governmental organization and independent institutions, as well as on the basis of the relevant domestic and especially international reports for the region, especially for the North Macedonia. The analysis has shown that the rise of the level of digitalization and elimination of the human factor has a key role in the prevention of the corruption. Therefore, we focus our efforts to creation and establish a system of measures that will contribute to elimination of the subjective influence in the process and fair and equitable law enforcement. The Ministry of Justice, together with the Public Prosecutor Office, are in charge of making an analysis of the necessary personnel, equipment, facilities, research centers, with the aim to strengthen the capacity of research center and therefore to strengthen the public prosecutor offices. Digitalization and equipment of this research center will speed up the process of solving the cases. This is the first part and the first obligation in our plan already adopted on the government level. The digital reform emphasizes a set of measures for full digitalizations of all the registers that are being kept by the Office for Management with registers of births, marriages, and deaths with the Ministry of Justice. Citizens will be able not only to apply electronically for a special document, but will also be able to receive the requested documents in the same manner. In addition to this, in order to improve the services for the citizens and business sector, we place in full function the central registry of population, where we already have all the information about the citizens. The information started in the identity cards, passports, information from the books of the Office for Management with registers of births, marriages, and deaths. This process shall mean elimination of the subjective impact, reducing of the time to obtain the documents, and isolation of the human factor and possible corruption, bribery for obtaining specific statements. We oblige the 7 anti-corruption institutions to connect themselves to the national platform for interoperability and to effectively apply the platform upon collection of data for a practical case. The platform ensures time exchange of data by electronic means for cases related to corruption, which is important for effective and fast results in the resolving of cases for which there is a suspicion of corruption. The preparation of the electronic software for connecting of all of the 28 inspection services will reduce the subjective and selective effect at the time of the inspection. The human factor will be reduced to the minimum. The software will enable electronic sharing of the results obtained from inspectors and follow-up, electronic generation of the minutes of conducted inspections on the spot, as well as strengthening the cooperation of inspectors with, from various institutions. Through creation of the central databases for issuing of permits and license, we will provide knowledge of the precise conditions about the kind of license issued to the specific company. All data will be public and transparent. This manner of operation provides fair competition in the business sector. The control mechanism for public procurements and strengthening. All public institutions should develop internal procedures for implementation of public procurements on the basis of respective models and specifications for public procurements. In this manner, the quality of procurements will be improved, together with the transparency in the conclusion of contracts, in order to remove the detected vulnerabilities which may lead to inconsistent to the principle of public procurements. We will make amendments to the law on public procurements. We will strengthen the administrative control of the procurement in order to be carried out in accordance with the law and to avoid possible risk of corruption in the conduct of public procurements. By means of appropriate measures, we will actualize and apply confiscation of property as a system-wide mechanism in the fight against corruption. For these reasons, within a period of 3 months, the Ministry of Interior will develop, according to the plan, will develop a strategy to strengthen the capacity to conduct financial investigations and confiscation of property 2021 to 2023, which will enhance the cooperation, the coordination between the competent authorities at the time of conducting of financial investigations in the area of monitoring of the flow of money, as well as detection of possible transformation, transmissions, and hiding of illegally gained property. The implementation of the recommendations from local and international non-governmental organizations in terms of modification and charge of the regulations for administrative offices and employees in the public sector is in the process of preparation. In parallel with this action, we also prepare an analysis of the content and implementation of the Code of Ethics for administrative officers. We announce the review of the code, improvements, and bringing the code closer to each and every employee. We apply the international adopted standards in the fights against corruption. All institutions and municipalities are obliged to designate and announce publicly a competent person for receipt of applications submitted as protected internal reporting on the existence of possible corruption. In this manner, we raise the awareness of citizens and encourage them to report case of corruptive activities. For the first time, we introduce a sole register for official vehicles, which will strictly regulate the manner of use of vehicles. We will know who, when, and in which manner the official vehicles is going to be used everywhere. In this manner, we will prevent misuse of official vehicles for private proposals, and we will have clear regulations for this. The plan establishes a system of tracking of cases and compliance built through a call center that is going to be opened soon. For the first time, at one place, the citizens and the businesses will be able to report cases of corruption, untimely or improper action of competent authorities will regard to their submitted applications. The citizens and businesses need to recognize the corruption and to report the case. We will raising the awareness among all state administration bodies, public enterprises and public institutions, and also municipalities to develop their annual anti-corruption program. We are working together with the State Anti-Corruption Commission to create a model for this the program for the specific institutions, and they will have need to propose the annual anti-corruption program according to the plan to the government, and this will with precise activities which encompass analysis of different risk area of corruption, the flows in the law, in the laws, the possible cases and risk factors for corruption, as well as the measures taken to strengthen the tools and transparency and accountability. And finally, I would like only to say that the fight against corruption and crime is second in the order of priorities in the government action 21, European standards and at home. Action 21 means order, justice, and nothing less than that. We have the political will. We are resolute. We have the allies with the citizens, and this is a real time for all of us to give our maximum of this to a reduction of these deviant events and to contribute together towards better and more right of society. Thank you for your attention, and I'm here during this panel, and I'm available for the discussions on this panel also. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Prime Minister Nikola, for the introduction to the efforts of the Macedonian government to fight corruption. As I announced, kind of one of early examples of so high-level dedication, and also congratulations on bringing the first national plan to fight corruption. Even if this is 1-2 months old already, you introduced what the government needs to do and stated its second highest priority. It remains to be seen up to what extent it will be fulfilled and whether it will be enough at all. So I'm glad you're staying for the presentation of the report so we can see to what extent the corruption became a biggest problem in the Balkans later on. Before presentation of the report, let me invite Nikola Bertolini, head of operations in the EU delegation here in Macedonia, but also a veteran in Balkan matters related to civil society, including thematic like this anti-corruption. So, Nikola, let's hear your view.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and dear Ljubčko Nikolowski, Deputy Prime Minister, for a lot of issues, including anti-corruption. Welcome. I I know you, Ljubcho, from your time as Minister of Agriculture, and you know that we were working very well, so I think that we can continue. Dear Ruslan Stefanov, who is still using as a picture a photo of 20 years ago, but he is a bit older like me, and so, but we also know since at least 10 years. So, I'm very happy to be here, and when my Director General, Mr. Popovsky, was looking for a replacement, of course, I immediately step up because I said, no, I know Seldi, I know the work they're doing, and indeed, congratulations for your work. It is of utmost importance in all what is concerned in the region, the development of rule of law and anti-corruption policies. First, let me also congratulate, as Alexander did, Mr. Nikolowski. You see, I'm monitoring you. I'm very close in looking at all what is concerned, even if we don't meet as often as we did in the past. I know that you prefer to meet other colleagues, but we are always backing you. Indeed, most of the actions that the Prime Minister described are also supported financially by us, from the register to the PPO, from public procurement. So many areas are involved. So let me start. The Western Balkans is an absolute priority for us. The European project is not finished until the Western Balkans are not inside. So we will continue. We are stable, and we are prepared to do so. The accession process lies on both sides. It needs to rest on solid trust, mutual confidence, and clear commitments. The 2020 and now 2021 have been challenging years for all of us, and this meeting demonstrates how still we are in a very challenging period. The initiatives endorsed at the Sofia summit last November build on commitments previously taken by the region at the EU Western Balkan Summit in Zagreb in May 2020. They will be supported now once and bigger as all the rest by the Economic Investment Plan. This is a challenging program. Up to 9 billion euro will be channeled through the region in a very limited number of years. But this will only happen if there is enough capacity to absorb and to use these funds, and transparency in using the funds, because we are aware that the possibility for corruption are in every angle of the society, as we heard, as we know. But of course, a big amount of funds going in suddenly to increase the so-called EU funds challenge to a fund in a very high and deep manner will imply a lot of risks that national authorities of the Western Balkans should be very well aware, and full capacity should be built in order to be strong and efficient, because efficiency of spending money goes also against corruption. If there are problems, corruption comes in. If infrastructure projects are stopped, then there are negotiations going on, and this is not good. So the Economic Investment Plan is an incredible opportunity that the country have now, but the country must be ready for doing this. And of course, the Economic Investment Plan will help the region to change the daily lives of people and the business for 4 to 5 years from now. It will speed up the economic development of the Western Balkans and boost regions' convergence with the European Union. However, the implementation of this plan goes hand in hand with the continued need for reforms. in the areas of the so-called fundamentals. These are consolidate the rule of law, fight and prevent corruption more effectively, pursue socioeconomic stabilization, ensure the proper functioning of democratic institutions, and sound public administration reform. Means all fundamentals are linked together. And anti-corruption is the important horizontal policy that should tackle all the different features of the development. Mr. Nikolowski already told us this. These fundamentals will become even more central in the accession negotiations. Negotiations on the fundamentals will be open first and closed last, and progress on these will determine the overall pace of negotiation. So chapter 23 and 24 will be the first to be open and the last to be closed. My friend Giulio Venneri will tell us more about this. The Commission will also further strengthen measures on the rule of law and institution building. Results on these reforms will be a requirement for deeper sectoral integration and progress overall. Anti-corruption work and much needed efforts will be mainstreamed through a strong focus in all respective relevant negotiation chapters. In our 2020 communication on EU enlargement policy last October, we have observed that unfortunately the Western Balkans region still illustrates widespread corruption. Robust results in the fight against corruption are needed to mitigate the real threats to democratic structures and for a stable and transparent business environment. High-level and political corruption needs to be tackled in a clearer and more consistent way. One positive sign of engagement is the agreement of Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, and North Macedonia to participate in the Sofia priority action on monitoring of trials in high-level corruption and organized crime cases. Further discussion in this regard is needed with Serbia. It means the Western Balkans leaders must deliver more credibly on their commitment to implement the fundamental reforms required. EU member states and citizens on both sides have legitimate concerns and need to be reassured of the unequivocal political will of the countries is proven by structural and tangible reforms. The civil society plays an important and concrete role as a watchdog and gives a reflection to regional governments on their path to address fight against corruption as a fundamental. We welcome the work in today's annual policy forum, which should bring in reflections for much needed reforms in respect to regulatory environment and the need to address corruption practices in the region. So I wish you all a productive and successful forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikola, for reminding that corruption is indeed one of the biggest problems in the region, not only in Macedonia, but in all the countries, including member states, as I assume Ruslan will tell us results also for Bulgaria, and that people expect visible results and especially on the high level corruption. On the other hand, you are announcing the package, let's say, for the Western Balkans in high amounts of support from European Union, and that by itself may pose a risk, as you said, of how those funds will be used or potentially misused. And I've heard recently a statement from a politician in Bulgaria, I don't know if it's a joke or Ruslan will tell us about that more, that Bulgaria expects so much money from the European Union that there will be enough for everybody and there will be no need for corruption. So if that is their plan to fight corruption, I don't think it will be useful or productive. But let's see the results now of the anti-corruption report, and then we can discuss later after the following set of panelists, starting with Ruslan Stefanov. Ruslan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Alexander, and thanks, Nikola, for reminding me that you know, time passes by. I've actually also set this picture behind me, you know, saying that good, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So we always need to be mindful and careful when we do our proposals. And I also thank Deputy Prime Minister Lucho Nikolsky for joining us today, because I think political leadership is something that is gravely needed in this domain of anti-corruption. I will now share my screen and I'll try to be very brief. I hope you could, because I could see there are already questions piling up in the Q&A session. Let me see how it works on, if I do a, okay, I hope you could see them. Is that, well, it will take a little bit of time maybe.
Yeah, we see the screen, but not the presentations. Now it's okay.
Okay, takes a little bit of time. Well, I will start by very briefly presenting the key metrics that you could see in the regional anti-corruption report. And this is, of course, an effort that has required the joint efforts of many of our partners in CELDI and also our subgrantees. I'm happy to say that in the past 2 years, we've also supported some grassroots organizations who have done a lot of really wonderful work across the Western Balkans. And I think we need to do more with that. So what you will be seeing, and it's already on celdi.net, our webpage, so you could go and download the report, is much more than what I'm saying, what I'll be presenting today. I will just go briefly through the different metrics. And I think this is one of the strong sides of CELDI. As Nikola mentioned, the watchdog function is really important, and we try to follow it with first, by keeping track of developments through the corruption monitoring system. We do that biannually. As we speak, we are preparing with the CELDI partners on the ground the next set of analysis, the set of data. We've developed an innovative instrument that monitors state capture. So it's called State Capture Assessment Diagnostic. You should check this out, what the results are there in the report. And of course, we're preparing right now the monitoring anti-corruption policy implementation, which will look into the work of specific institutions and try to help them build anti-corruption capacity. So all these different instruments that we're trying to use show the multifaceted approach that needs to be taken to anti-corruption. And I will just go through the results from 3 of them, state capture assessment, diagnostic, on corruption monitoring system, and on hidden economy monitoring, because the opportunities in the economy, as Nikola mentioned, are going to be in the spotlight in the next decade, I think. And then I will focus most of my presentation on the recommendations, because after me, colleagues will speak also on the judiciary and on other issues of the report. I urge you to read it. I think it's an excellent read. You could of course focus on the executive summary, but I think inside there are a lot of really good ideas on different topics: public administration, legislative reform, judicial reform, the role of civil society, where we present and highlight also the work of our subgrantees in the region, and of course international cooperation. So the need for an external anchor, and I think the European Union is best in this respect. Just as a way of introducing how complex and how deep the challenge is that faces our governments in the region, actually governments across the world. If there is one thing that we've realized in these more than 20 years of working on anti-corruption, it is that it's not a final destination. It's a journey that each generation has to go through, because power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. There will always be vulnerabilities, and we always need to be mindful that in the end of the day, we need to focus on improving our democratic systems day in, day out. And I think this is also in terms of maybe one of the first ideas we need to share and maybe discuss later on. We need to manage expectations. Governments on the ground typically think in 4-year terms or even less. So they try to close the issue of anti-corruption within the first half of their mandate. We've seen this all over, in the EU, in Central and Eastern Europe, with the accession negotiations, Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, the first 10 of Central and Eastern Europe. We're seeing it also in the Western Balkans. Governments tend to tire quickly. They get wary of anti-corruption. And this is something that is normal, but at the same time, we need to be aware that the issue is much larger, that we have many, many issues to deal with, and we should be mindful that it takes decades. And that is a journey, that we take this journey together with our citizens, and we try to do it better every time. There are such issues, right now what we are doing with focusing on state capture vulnerabilities is just the business capture. We look at the monopolization and the concentration of power between politics and economics, and you could look into these different issues, monopolization, privileged access to procurement, lobbyist law, privileged legal status, concentration of subsidies, and ineffectiveness of anti-monopoly law within the report. But there are other issues that we need to deal with, and we hope, we're thankful for the support of the European Commission and of course our partners from the Central European Initiative for supporting our work, but we need to also do much more. And I think there are also partners out there in the region that do this at civil society. We need to look at institutional capture. We need to look at political capture, how politically exposed persons are abusing loopholes in our legislation, and the black market capture. There are a lot of money out there, that illicit funds, and we need to know what's happening with them. We need to look at the environment. We need to look at media. Media has been a grave story all across the Balkans, but also internationally. We've lived through a drastic change in the media landscape. We need to be. Media is essentially the judiciary of society. Capture them and the judiciary, and you capture the whole democracy. And authoritarian political leaders do understand that. And actually, it's a natural trend in political leaders to do that. Administrative corruption, of course, if you don't manage administrative corruption, then clearly you will have this creates an environment of lawlessness that of course spreads, and of course judiciary corruption. Now let me just go very briefly through some of the numbers without focusing explicitly on them, just to show what the results are. I think you've seen all these, but the important thing is what stands behind it. How do we read the tea leaves, so to say? So we've seen, for example, on the pressure side and on state capture enablers, that they're pretty high all across the region. And although they might not be, there are notable differences in all of the countries of the region. There are vulnerabilities in terms of business state capture pressure and state capture enablers, those environmental factors that might, like very well functioning anti-monopoly laws or very well implemented anti-monopoly laws. So all these issues are critically important. Or well functioning media, for example, that's also not really the case. Now, in terms of corruption dynamics, and we've chosen here to show just the dynamics factor because I want to underscore this. We've been around for more than 20 years. We started with USAID support. Now we are happy to get the European Commission support. We've grown into more than 30 partners. And one thing that we've realized is that there is always space for improvement. First of all, we need to realize that the EU has contributed a lot to improving the situation on the ground, the anti-corruption situation on the ground. And also many governments, including governments that ended up, being mired in corruption, has done a lot in some of other terms of theirs, to improve that. But technically, we've done quite a lot. Transparency has increased, the work has increased. As we saw from the Deputy Prime Minister this morning, previously, those agendas, they really work. They do deliver But what we need to do is we need to sustain the action, because this is not a given. You know, if there is a change in the external and the internal environment, we could see a spike back in corruption. And I look forward to the data we'll probably release later this year or the beginning of next year, when we will know post-pandemic, you know, what has happened with corruption. And like I said, there is an extremely high level of informality across the region. That means a lot of financial resources flowing around that needs to be taken into account. These don't end up in our welfare systems, and these, of course, deprive us of the needed public policy resources to support our policies. Now, let me focus on 6 key topics, or even less, and I hope, Alexander, that I have another minute or two. One of the things we've realized is that the European Commission and the European Union, being the clear external anchor for the region, has done a great deal and a lot in improving the transparency, in moving anti-corruption in the right direction. And I think this has been very, very visible. But at the same time, one of the key features of anti-corruption is political engagement, and it also means protecting the anti-corruption policies from inside and outside. You know, and what we've seen in the past, particularly 2 or 3 years, and particularly in the pandemics, has been that players like China and Russia has been very, very, even I would say, maliciously intent on disrupting this this EU integration of the region. And I think this is more and more visible. I mean, we've seen the visit recently of European Commission President and the Council President in Turkey, and the way they've been treated. We've seen it with Mr. Lavrov and the way he treated the Mr. Borrell. We've seen it in their trying to delegitimize EU as a whole, as if it doesn't exist as a foreign policy partner. I think one thing needs to be clear, and that is that the EU stands behind the Western Balkans accession, but also that it would need to insist that local leaders accept that and praise that, and do provide their clear path of change that they're going to engage with. You know, it doesn't work being, you know, kind of allowing this kind of always throwing all the blame on Brussels, you know, and at the same time praising Beijing and Moscow. It doesn't work that way. And I think this needs to be made very clear. And this needs to be made that clear that also conditionalities will stick, you know. So if you don't deliver, you don't get the funds, you know. And I think it's got to be made very, very clear, because we've seen this also, as Alexander mentioned, in the case of EU, the newest EU members. You know, the EU introduced now the rule of law mechanism within the EU itself, because as we agreed, it's not a journey. You don't end up in the EU and then all your problems disappear. No, it just continues to be there, and you need to continue fighting. You know, Bulgaria, Romania, they've been Poland, Hungary, they've been a prime example, you know, of that you could have a backsliding, and you need to be vigilant. That means our main goal is probably to spur domestic demand for accountability. That means this is the role of civil society. We need to engage with governments, however difficult that is. For example, in the case of Serbia, we've done our way, for example, with our partners. We've pushed and tried to engage the anti-corruption agency there. And we understand it's difficult for them too, because this is a politically sensitive topic. But at the same time, this is what can deliver the best results for citizens in terms of improved education, healthcare outcomes, and of course in terms of prosperity. Just a couple of more questions, more points. We need to mainstream anti-corruption into a broader range of policies, and that, however self-servingly might be, there needs to be more support for partnerships between civil society and government, and there needs to be more direct engagement on the part of the international donors with civil society in the region and outside the region, because we think that spurring this internal domestic demand for transparency and accountability, including critical sectors, so focusing on supporting the reformist-minded people within government, is important. And we hope that our good cooperation with the European Commission will continue both at the regional level, but also within countries. And with that, allow me to stop here and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruslan, and for focusing on the most important issue and the key points of the report. In the meantime, colleagues from CSD shared the report, and perhaps you already got it, and you can see quite a lot more details about that, so you can see and comment. I have a message that the Vice Prime Minister has to leave now. If he's still here and still wants to address us before he goes, there was one question, at least in the Q&A session, about the role of civil society that he expects to be. If he's still here, let's give him opportunity to readdress us. If he already left, then we can move on. Of course, there will be somebody from his office to follow the whole.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Nela,
Yes.
Deputy Prime Minister. First of all, I want to apologize in the name of Deputy Prime Minister. He had to leave. He had an emergency meeting. So for the furthermore questions, I'm here. As the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, the collaboration between the government, especially our cabinet, with the non-government organizations, is our big strategy, and it's created in our plan, as he mentioned. Previously, we pronounced a public call to all non-government organizations to submit the proposals from their side that are going to be part from our plan. We received very good and very useful proposals from the non-government organizations that are also part of from our plan. So for the furthermore questions, I'm on your use.
Thank you, and yeah, thank you for being with us for the rest of the workshop. Let's move on now with Giulio Veneri from the DGNIR and European Commission view on this report, but also more on the view from the Brussels to the whole region and the issue of anti-corruption. Mr. Veneri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to intervene to your activities. We have a consolidated cooperation with the MCAC and also with CERDI, so it's always really a true pleasure to contribute to your reflections. I took note of all the various interventions, in particular a couple of points made by Ruslan, on which I will try to comment. First of all, I would like very quickly to pass a word of congratulations and commend the leadership of the project. And once again, as I said, with MCAC and CERDI, we've collaborated a lot. So just to commend your efforts and also the efforts of all the participating CSOs in the project on civil society for good governance and anti-corruption in Southeast Europe, which we find have been able to contribute successfully to the objective of the project. We find that in terms of strengthening partnerships, cross-fertilization, strengthening the concrete impact both on policy making on one side and implementation of anti-corruption policies on the other, with strong effective monitoring mechanisms. It's something that it's clearly visible. Same goes for awareness raising. So really allow me just to quickly commend all the achievements of the project and of your respective contribution, along with all other CSOs across Southeast Europe that you have managed to involve as other active partners. When we were having some exchanges on what were the main possible areas for me to contribute to you as a representative of the Center of Thematic Expertise on Rule of Law from DGNIR, I gather some hints from the colleagues at MCAC about thinking, what is the thinking on mainstreaming anti-corruption This was something that I took note. What is our thinking on a stronger focus on political engagement and involvement of local elites in a more meaningful way on reforms in the rule of law and anti-corruption in particular? What is our thinking on strengthening the focus on the economic side of the fundamentals? And then I also note that the wishes to get some reflection on how we tackle third countries' influence in the region. Of course, if I were to address all these aspects that I got in your suggestion, I would have to speak too long. So I'll try to touch upon these points very quickly, and I appreciate if then colleagues or other participants from the audience have more specific information to streamline my contribution and reflection. I'll start from the last point, also because Ruslan mentioned something very, very interesting when he said that many leaders from third actors are trying their best to delegitimize the EU and its public image in the world. Well, I'm not so surprised for that, it's clear, and the Western Balkans is geopolitically and strategically a clear battlefield in that regards. It's clear that if we look at the Balkans, third actors are growing their influence and their presence. Most of them are semi-authoritarian regimes. I think we cannot feel confident if we use that labeling, which they're purely doing business and they're not promoting rights, they're not promoting values, they're not promoting green policies, let alone anti-corruption efforts. So this is, I think, something that is has to be clear in our mind. It's about virtuous alliances that are those that we want to build from a EU perspective with the governments, but also, most importantly, with the civil society to change for good, to make the entrenchment of the rule of law finally irreversible, and so the fight against corruption. And on the other side, we have, allow me to say, in some cases, vicious partnership, because we saw that third actors have by pushing their economic interests, have been disregarding green policies, disregarding issues related to the protection of labor, and so on and so forth. So there is a big difference between how we do business, how we intend to do business, and how some other operators are doing business. And in the Balkans, it's very important that we do not lose the grip. This is something that I think I already mentioned in our previous encounter at the seminar that CELDI organized on specifically on state capture. So in this light, the partnership with civil society, and this is why the project that guarantee this cross-fertilization and platform, like the project you're steering, are very, very important, because this is how we manage to strengthen our virtuous alliance and to unhinge possibly, or make the life more difficult to other type of, as I said, vicious partnerships. And it is crucial really for the EU to hold the fort in the region and to maintain a fluid relationship, a healthy relationship with civil societies, with all the actors that are helping us to promote the entrenchment of the rule of law, and promote in particular both the prevention and the fight of corruption. Now, how are we going to step up the efforts? I noted your appetite in learning more about the mainstreaming of anti-corruption in the engagement of the European Union and the Commission in particular with the Western Balkan countries. It has been mentioned this morning that the fight against corruption, when we look at the Western Balkans and beyond, but I'm focusing obviously on candidate and potential candidates, remains a scourge, remains one of the most pressing and also sensitive challenges that we have to face, and we have to jointly address. And this affects both candidate countries, those that are more advanced in the enlargement pipeline, as well as potential candidates. And I think the graph that Ruslan shared, based on their state capture methodology, I think was very interesting in showing how the trends remain, to say the least, complicated in terms of our joint challenge. And anti-corruption is crucial also because it's something that we can't sideline in no action whatsoever, because it's only through anti-corruption that we can assist the governments in a meaningful way in their respective efforts to guarantee the rule of law, to guarantee true socioeconomic stabilization, and hence ultimately also to create an environment that is more conducive also to foreign direct investments, because the trust from business, economic and financial operator remains, although unevenly across the region, also still quite low. So our challenge is about helping governments in the region to pursue reforms that will help them to win back the hearts and the trust of the citizens, but also, as I mentioned, the trust of businesses and economic operators from the region and also beyond. Where we stand, I think in the last enlargement package, we could not have been more clear when we mentioned that, of course, we noted some progress across the region, both in preventing and in countering corruption, although, as I said, unevenly. But there is the worrying continuous presence of certain elements of state captures that shall not be disregarded. And also there are some doubts across the region on whether the consolidation of the rule of law has been truly irreversible or not. And this is something that it should make us think. In last year, not only we adopted, as usually happens, the enlargement package, but early in 2020 we adopted a new methodology. And here I go to the issue of mainstreaming anti-corruption. In that context, the Commission committed to strengthen further all efforts for the rule of law, and specifically on anti-corruption, we committed to further mainstream anti-corruption, and I'm quoting from the strategy of last year, through a strong focus across all relevant chapters. So this is a strategic commitment that we have found. Of course, the new methodology looks primarily at the countries that are in the pipeline for starting negotiations, but also there is, as you all know, strategic discussion on how to streamline and apply the methodology also to the countries that are already engaged in negotiations, namely Serbia and Montenegro. And this cross-cutting relevance of anti-corruption goes very well beyond Chapter 23, Judiciary and Fundamental Rights, where the bulk of the key on anti-corruption is dealt with, as well as Chapter 5, which is the chapter in the context of which we address public procurements. Specific elements to anti-corruption policies emerge obviously in the economic criteria for accession, but also in many other chapters for negotiations, namely Chapter 4, for instance, free movement of capitals, but obviously Chapter 24, the other rule of law chapter, justice, freedom and security, but also in other parts of our agenda, ranging from the Custom Union, Chapter 29, financial control, Chapter 32, financial and budgetary provision, Chapter 33, and so on and so forth. So the key on anti-corruption is possibly the most articulated, and is also an key that in the past few years has been growing quite a lot. So this idea of streamlining and strengthening anti-corruption across the pillars of our engagement with candidate and potential candidate is a clear strategic innovation, but it's something that flourished somehow automatically from the complexity of the challenge and also the complexity of the response at the legislative and strategic level that we have in the European Union. And beyond the specific challenges of the negotiations and the enlargement policy, this cross-cutting relevance of anti-corruption is also finding a very important core place in the new economic and investment plan, the EIP, that has been adopted, with the prospect for the Commission to mobilize up to 9 billion investments in the region. This is anti-corruption. I strongly suggest to all the friends who have not yet done so to skim through the EIP, through the communication that presents the EIP, and clearly understand how anti-corruption has been highlighted in a strategic way across the EIP from very different but ultimately always intertwined perspectives. So when we talk about mainstreaming anti-corruption, we can say that somehow the EIP represents the first test case to this new methodology that has the ambition of further mainstreaming anti-corruption policies. And in the EIP, this is clearly spelled out, because the plan highlights the needs to align all public procurement rules to the EU standards, but also to implement these public procurement rules more effectively. And this applies also obviously to the EIP, but also beyond the EIP. There is the hope that the efforts for the EIP will then ultimately generate irreversible change in this regard. And obviously, the EIP also mentioned the need to prevent fraud, fight money laundering, and pursue in this area with determination. And final, and I conclude the quotes and the excerpts from the EIP. The document also stresses that there are structural weaknesses that are linked, I'm quoting again, from poor governance, and also these are connected to the rule of law and also to the respect for fundamental rights, which has been once again highlighted in the picture. You understand very well that from these quotes and from these excerpts, and I go back to the first point that I made when I mentioned the different challenges and the different way of doing business, that we are different from other authoritarian regimes that are trying to find their way out in various economic sectors in the regions, ranging from constructions to energy and so on and so forth. So we need to keep the guard high, we need to hold the fort, we need to strengthen our partnership. And how do we do that? Well, I think the new methodology has also provided some answers, and I go towards my conclusions. We need to maintain, to strengthen the political engagement, and also demand and obtain that there is political credibility at the basis of reforms, particularly in the rule of law and corruption sectors, that governments are not paying lip service to the anti-corruption policies, and that also in the context of public administration reforms, and also in the context of enabling a true functioning of all democratic institutions and all the agencies across the state structures that contribute to an healthy functioning of the state administration. So the political dimension clearly remains the very core and the very basic methodological requirement that is ahead of us in terms of pushing for more accountability, pushing for more responsible leadership. And in this, and I go back and conclude to my initial point, obviously the partnership with the civil society is invaluable. The investment in the civil society remains invaluable and remains the best possible way to strengthen accountability. So with that, I conclude, and I am clearly back at my original words of commending your efforts and your ambitions to do good, which is what is indeed needed, and to generate reforms that are sustainable, that truly help the life of citizens, that truly, as I said, also generate more appetite for business operator to bring their money with the certainty that the rule of the law is entrenched and their capitals are not at risk, or that they have to pay high bribes to obtain bids and so on and so forth. So thank you again for the invitation, and a good continuation. I remain here also for possible questions.
Thank you, Mr. Venerin. This elaboration on the view of European Commission and commitment in the enlargement policy to mainstream these anti-corruption issues and cooperate with civil society on that. We have already entered the time for discussion, but we still have two colleagues, panelists to present their views on the issue. And in the meantime, we got 5 questions in the Q&A session. So I ask panelists to, in the meantime, while this last presentation are going on, you can answer. I see already on one issue that there is a lively debate, but the others can be tackled by writing in the Q&A section. In the parallel, I invite Misha Popovic to address us.
Hello. Just to find the, sorry.
Yes, we see it.
Yeah. Hello. Thanks, Alexander. Thank you again, colleagues from CELDI, for giving me the opportunity to present briefly my thoughts about what to do in the next decade against corruption, based on the research that the whole network has done, not only with the regional anti-corruption report, but also with many other products, but more so the lively discussion and interchange between the colleagues about the state of affairs in the Western Balkans. So I'll try to be short and talk about both, I would say, major aspects of the issue or the problem of corruption, and that is the pressure from below, or the administrative corruption or corruption in everyday life, which in the Western Balkans, it's obvious that it is seen as destiny, as something that is a vicious circle based on these 3, I would say, manifestations or outcomes that come from the widespread everyday, let's call it like that, everyday corruption in the Western Balkans. So firstly, the corruption monitoring system monitors or explores victimization or actual experience with corruption. This is something that is very specific to the method, and it is seen in the figure 1 that both pressure and involvement in corruption is relatively high. If we multiply these percentages with the actual adult population, this goes into hundreds of thousands of yearly transactions in terms of someone asking for a bribe and a citizen giving a bribe to get things done. So this is a very big problem, and comparative to the EU average, this is way above average. But theoretically, what the Center for the Study of Democracy is saying, we need to see numbers around 5%, because this is when, as opposed to this vicious cycle, a virtuous cycle starts, which kind of feeds into the fight of corruption, not into this more pessimistic versus vicious circle. So when people have this experience or know someone with a similar experience, then this brings the second manifestation. This is the perception or expectation of corruption, and this is seen in figure 6, and these numbers are really high, especially if we see North Macedonia has the biggest expectation that people, when they go to the institutions, they will be asked for a bribe. There is significant variation, but even Serbia is way high than it should be. And when people have experience and when people have expectation, then this becomes shared expectation. It becomes slowly normal, not on a normative, in a normative sense, but it becomes way of life. And this brings us to the third outcome, and I would say the most devastating one, and that is that people think that nothing can be done against corruption, and this is losing the potential of civil society, of civic action in fighting corruption. And there are this is one of the pillars. I mean, civic action is one of the pillars in successful outcomes against corruption. The other being free media. On the other side, there is this high-level corruption, and the European Union, in their strategy for the Western Balkans, they kept talking about risks of state capture, and the research on state capture diagnostics shows that again we see high numbers of institutional enablers of state capture. So these are the four elements of institutions enabling state captures, and they are high in all countries. And I would say this is like a lack of integrity of institutions, which should prevent high-level corruption happening in certain sectors. Then there is lack of impartiality in how they operate in those sectors. And then we have a bias of these regulators and agencies towards private interests as opposed to their competence to protect the public interest. And at the end, there is ineffectiveness of anti-corruption policies. So we see variations, but then we don't see much. We don't see numbers that are that much encouraging. So having these two dimensions, what to do. So one is investing in institutions. So this is institutional part. So corruption is usually, if you look at it as events, then we have an event, something corrupt happening, then we have identification, and then investigation, prosecution, and sanction. This is the normal part of getting against corruption, but we see problems in investigation, prosecution, and sanction. And if we have carefully listened for the structure of anti-corruption action in plans, let's say the plan, the government plan in North Macedonia, there is bias to invest in structure as opposed to agency. So we invest in making new rules, making new procedures, but we don't see agency as an important pillar or the human capital in those institutions as the important pillar of action. And but on the ground, when we see that there are good regulations in place, agency fails. So even at the level of transparency, we have good setups, but then when something really has to be published, which is not very, how can I say, positive for the government, then transparency can be avoided. And this is an agency problem. This is not a problem of structure. So for the EU actors, what this means is that the EU should take more decisive roles in not supporting instances like that. There are many technical assistance projects working with people who are actually veto players, as someone has said, players who act against institutionalization of the new rules or reform. So this is not supporting the expected outcome of, I would say, EU intervention. So the EU, especially the Commission, should be much more particular with whom they support and who are the people, because the EU support in certain agencies, in certain institutions, legitimizes the management, which in turn can be the veto players actually. So the other way to tackle corruption is the civic path or the collective action path. So this in the whole cycle, this adds pressure, and it improves identification and pressure. And by identification and pressure, I mean exactly media as identification and civic action as pressure. And this means more investment in this kind of setup. Because it sustains on a long run the negative effects, because government can change, but not only government, ministers, decision makers can change in particular sectors, and then we see decline in this particular sector. So civil society and media can sustain backsliding for a while. But also mobilize civic action to on a more long-term prevent backslide. So what at the end, what should be the role of the EU here? So as I said, the support to institutions is welcome. But currently we are seeing that the decrease of EU credibility, particularly in COVID era, but a little bit before that, and inability to push for more credible enlargement policy. This feeds into or to the benefit of the already non-credible local political actors, and we see these non-credible local political actors in all the governments in the Western Balkans. So the latest example is the enroachment of in Serbia against critics. So more overt attack with the example of the attack on Krik. So, but we also see in a similar fashion, and if we kind of transpose credibility with leverage, when the EU loses leverage in newly member states, we see weak performance in enforcing improvements in rule of law. So we see this in recent member states. I think that there should be a shift, more decisive shift from funding technical assistance to funding civil society. Why? Because we see that actually collective action is starting to push against even some EU partners, and we see this like protests in Bulgaria slowly shifting the landscape. No matter the outcome, it is a vote of mistrust into corrupt elites. We see this change of government in Montenegro and Kosovo, who were seen as EU partners, but again, the public voted in favor of some promise of better governance. So I think the more important role of the EU should be amidst all those non-credible local actors to fund more openly collective actions against corruption. This means civil society on a in its technical manifestations. These are watchdogs and research organizations like think tanks, but also media and local grassroots organizations which can channel the knowledge of these to more technical, I would say, research-oriented civil society into mobilizing public support, public demand for better governance, for anti-corruption, and creating alternatives and resilience against corruption. I will stop here in favor of.
Thank you, Misha, and also for pointing out some expectations from civil society towards the EU. We will have questions to polls for all of the participants shortly within Biljana's presentation, one and not just after that one more. We are a bit running out of time, but we will hear Biljana's presentation last, and in the meantime, I see you do have active debate on the Q&A session, so I encourage also the others to join there and try to answer remaining questions. So Biljana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm glad to have opportunity to share with all of you our main conclusions of regional report on judiciary, which is also part of the regional anti-corruption report that CELDI prepared. I'll try to be brief and to share only main conclusions and recommendations that we prepared in this process. Just a second to share my screen. Corruption and a lack of independence and undue influence are still prevalent in judicial systems of Western Balkan countries. Separation of powers and the independent judiciary remain only a theory. This is one of the major obstacles on the European path of the Western Balkan countries. Despite the favorable assessment of legislative reform, in practice, the judiciary is not protected from political influence or influence of the legislative and executive branch. This is especially evident in the selection and promotion of judicial official holders, accompanied by accusation of bias, conflict of interest, and inconsistent implementation of law. All of the countries have been carrying out prolonged judicial reforms, which entail the adoption of strategic documents, laws that keep failing us bring closer to our goal, depoliticized and independent judiciary. Significant progress has not been observed beyond the formal legislative approximation mandated by the EU. As a result, public perception of judiciary corruption is grim. According to public survey prepared within CELDI project in the Western Balkan countries, as you may see on this graphic, over 50% of citizens in each country, up to 94 in one moment in Albania, believe the judiciary officials are corrupt. Independent judiciary is highlighted as one of the key reform priorities in the EU accession process. Besides that, work independence protects judges and prosecutors from all kinds of influence, both criminal and political. Appointment, promotion, and dismissal of judges in the Western Balkans is followed by the strong political influence and corruption affairs. I wouldn't go in details for each country. If you are interested, you can see it in the report and also in our policy document that tackles judiciary as a special focus. I will say also that besides independence, accountability and integrity of judiciary remains also vulnerable areas of the reform in the region. European Commission precisely reminds through its report on the Western Balkan countries that results in the enforcement of disciplinary accountability and of code of ethics for judges and prosecutors are still very, very limited. Western Balkan countries typically do not have legal provisions and bodies dealing with corruption that is especially among judges and prosecutors. Lack of independence and integrity of the judiciary in Western Balkans directly affects poor performance in fight against corruption. Recent results in the region have not been impressive. This is indicated by track records in corruption cases, especially for high-level public officials. The number of final convictions of public officials implicated in corruption remain in the single digits, despite public knowledge which indicates otherwise. According to all relevant international reports in the previous period, main reasons for this are political influence, institutional capacities, and weak institutional cooperation. In the country of Western Balkans, institutional arrangements vary considerably among countries regarding anti-corruption specialization. From Albania, which have specialized anti-corruption court, to no specialized institution in Kosovo. The European Commission has emphasized that Western Balkan countries show clear elements of state capture, including links with organized crime and corruption at all levels of government and administration, as well as strong connection of public and private interest. EU has repeatedly asked for establishment of concrete and sustained track records in tackling corruption, money laundering, and organized crime. Despite these warnings, recent results in the region have not been impressive. There are many steps that Western Balkan countries need to undertake to achieve EU standards of law enforcement. We prepared some recommendations, which I will say now, that are specifically for the judiciary and prosecution, since the judiciary is the institution providing the key check and balances to state capture. Despite continuous attempts and reforms, judicial independence and freedom of corruption has not yet not been achieved in any of the countries in the Western Balkans. Independence of judiciary and prosecutorial council in Western Balkans should be secured by having its judges elected by members, by creating their own procedural rules. These should be public and open for scrutiny. The participation of government ministries, typically of justice, in judicial self-governing bodies should be minimized or abolished altogether. Countries where majority of judicial self-governing bodies are not elected among judges and by judges should adopt reform to increase relevant voting powers. The processes of appointment, promotion, and dismissal of judges and prosecutors needs to be transparent to public while following legal procedure. Existing codes of judicial ethics should be amended to address corruption, since there are no specific legal provisions and bodies dealing with judiciary corruption. In countries where both prosecutors and courts are governed by the same body, prosecutors and judges need to be separately set up. And last but not the least, continuous training for holders of judicial office should be made compulsory and accessible to all. This will ensure their competence in terms of knowledge and qualification. Since I come from Montenegro, which in one point of EU integration process were a leader or front runner in the Western Balkans, I might say that all the reform results which were positively assessed by EU are now threatened to be annulled, since we came into a stage that all the constitutional reform and the reform of our judicial system is not enough when we lack the implementation, and we now are facing the blockade of the system, judicial system, crisis of the prosecutorial and also judicial council. In a previous period, you probably know that we had the proposition of new parliamentarian majority to change the prosecutorial laws that was negatively assessed by Venice Commission. And at this moment, I can say it's a short way from a regional leader to blockade of the judicial institutions. So I think research and reports like this may be only productive if the stakeholders within our country read them and follow the good recommendations and implement it in our system. Thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't take too much time for other participants.
Thank you, Biljana. And with that, we conclude the presentations that were planned for this workshop. We also exhausted the time, but we can continue for 5-10 minutes more. I think we had one or two poll questions to ask all of you, so we can get our responses from that. If the colleagues from CSD can pose the questions so we can all answer. And in the meantime, I see a lively debate on the Q&A section. So if there are still some questions not answered there, we can continue live here. So if anybody wants to raise any question more than what is written already in the Q&A, please raise your hand and ask the question to panelists now. If there is any, and I am asking CSD colleagues if you are going to do the poll on the EU question, at least for now. Oh yes, there is this. So you can, I think, check 3 options from this, and the question is, what can the EU do to curb corruption and state capture in the Western Balkans in the next 3 years, mainly for the attention of Mr. Giulio Veneri to see what I would say civil society from the Western Balkans expects from EU. We will not comment or debate much the results, but please do click 3 options and we see how we stand on the expectations.
Hello, can I start commenting some of the questions?
Yes,
can
please,
you put,
Nikola, until we will see probably the results in the meantime, but do feel free to do
Can
so.
you put the question again on the screen?
Daniela, can you do that?
Because the question say, what can the EU do? I think that
John Kennedy would say what you can do.
exactly, because we are doing a lot, we are doing too much. Now is the time for the country and the national administrations to really improve the way they program, implement, and monitor EU funds. What we are observing, the whole region, is an absolute backlog of funds not being used because there is not enough capacity. So, and not capacity in terms of number of staff, but in terms also of the quality of the contracting, procurement contracting, quality of the monitoring, and taking up the results. So, I mean, we can say that and also in Montenegro and Serbia, is the same in all countries, but the move we started in North Macedonia during IPA 1, I'm saying IPA 1 because of the period 2007-2013, was that in North Macedonia and in Turkey, big majority of the funds were contracted under indirect management. This means national authorities were on the lead. Based on the lessons learned and based on the very low absorption, we are now more and more re-centralizing the management of funds, which is not good. But we were forced to do because we didn't see enough use of funds, so enough results of the use of EU funds in pushing for reforms. So we re-centralized, and this re-centralization of funds is going on in all the countries, which is not good in relation to the time the country will be member states. So they will have to manage themselves the money. So means that we are lacking the proper capacity. So the EU now wants to start again giving the management of funds to the national authorities, but this should be accompanied by stronger rules and stronger capacity. So this is a very important point. So I think the question is also what the country should do in order to improve the management and the use of EU funds. I wanted just to comment this part. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we saw the results in the meantime. I don't see it anymore, but yeah, the increase of funding was, I think, the most answered question. But as Mr. Bertolini said, that's not enough. And as Kennedy would say, let's do more ourselves. It's not all solutions in more funding from the EU. Ruslan wants probably to get a wrap up on the debate that was going on in parallel, or maybe on the whole workshop. Ruslan?
Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Nikola, for all the great interventions. I think it was, as always, an excellent forum with lots of really good good proposals also in the Q&A. I think corporate transparency is an important issue. This was mentioned in the discussions, and we need to follow up on that. I mean, I think CELDI could do a lot more. I think both, you know, the thing is, we look up a lot, we expect, of course, a lot from the EU and the EC. And I agree with Nikola that local governments need to deliver too. And they actually need to deliver more because this is in the best interest of their citizens. But I think also we need to reach out to the, specific people, you know, so the Commission and the EU needs to reach out to citizens of the countries, making it clear that they need to have that that focus. Now, let me just say that we have a lot of technical issues to deal with, including this corporate transparency, but we need to also come up with this new political momentum. I mean, we've seen it on the US side with the initiative of the new president, you know, for democracy and human rights. I think the EU needs to step up its effort. You know, I think the EU needs to do more in terms of Magnitsky-style legislation and not be afraid to use it, including corruption as part of the human rights abuses. I think we need to do more on corporate transparency within the EU itself and also on the rule of law mechanisms. And I think we need to bring up and ask the governments of our partners in the Western Balkans to be accountable. I think they need to understand this is not some exclusion. This is not some second-class citizens. This is not some, you know, some putting something in as additional requirements all along. This is because the same requirements are held for the countries within the EU. So I think this is critically important. So while we keep pushing these technical improvements, which the Commission has done a great job in doing with the local governments, of course, and with civil society, I think we need to come up with more ideas, and we need to keep kind of pressuring the governments locally to do more. And I think, as Biljana mentioned, you know, the Montenegro was on the forefront. Now North Macedonia seems to be doing well. We see this impetus that we heard from the Deputy Prime Minister. We need to encourage that, but we need to also make sure that the other countries follow suit. So thanks a lot for the great ideas, and I look forward to working with you and doing more on the issue on tackling state capture and anti-corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruslan. And as we are already beyond and some participants started to leave, as I guess many of us were quite busy people, are there any last interventions or questions to slowly close this workshop? I saw there was an interesting debate going on in especially on the issue, isn't that contradictory to expect state capture to be resolved by institutions if they are captured? but there was some answers on that, and you can read in that. I hope you can all check out again the regional anti-corruption report and follow up on that. And I wish you all continued efforts in the fight against corruption with institutions, with pressure on institutions, with cooperation with the European Union, and among ourselves. And I guess there are no more raised hands, so I also wish you a nice day. It became sunny here in Skopje, so hopefully the spring finally came, and hopefully Corona will be gone soon. So I wish you all the best, and thank you for participation in today's event. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you again.